Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are live here today on Awakening with A Course in Miracles, and my name is Craig Villarrubia, and as I always am when I start this show, I'm really excited. I'm excited to join with mighty companions for the purpose of being reminded of what's true, and I'm excited about today's guest. Today's guest is Kevin Rice, who I've never met. But what I do know is I've seen Kevin's videos on YouTube, and I have been touched and inspired by his sharing and enjoyed very much the communication that has come through him. So I'm excited to have him on the show. He has a book that I'm excited to hear more about, as well as an academy that I'll share the link with where you can find out more information. But before we get to Kevin, I just want to make some announcements. A couple of things coming up that I'd like to share with everybody. Next week, our guest will be Michael Murray on the Google Hangout, Awakening with A Course in Miracles. In April, there's the ACIM conference in Vegas, and I will be there with Corrine Zupko. So if you have not registered and you feel a tickle in your heart to go ahead and sign up now before the prices of the tickets go up. And also note that Miracle Share is giving away $50 scholarships toward the purchase of the ticket or any of the expenses in going to Vegas for the conference. There's also a webinar, I forgot, that's next week, next Sunday, that I'll be hosting, which I'm really excited about. It's the first time that I'm coming to a webinar series with a very thought out, a practical way of looking at some of the course principles or core teachings of A Course in Miracles. So I'm really excited about that. That's next Sunday, and if you want to know more information about that, you can go to my website, and the title of it is SOAR. There is a retreat coming up in Hawaii in May. Visit my website, you can get more information about that. And there's also a retreat in Colorado. I'm joining a whole bunch of teachers, Gary Renard, David Hoffmeister, Maria Felipe, Bruce Rawls, and a whole gathering. David Fishman will be there too, so please come join us. Okay, and I think that's it with the announcements, and we can go ahead and get started. So thank you again for joining me. So today's, excuse me one second, I have a call coming in, and I'm sure it's somebody who could not get into the room because the room is full today. Okay, so I think we're set with Okay, I think we're set now. I think we had a call come in. Sometimes when the room gets full, I get Hangout calls. So okay. So today's topic is the holy instant, and I just want to share a little bit about that before I introduce my guest and open this up. When I think about the holy instant, you know, today being the topic, holy instant, I re-looked at chapter 15, and I was just reminded of all the gems in A Course in Miracles as it relates to the holy instant in this particular chapter. And I just want to read the first line from chapter 15. It reads like this. Can you imagine what it means to have no cares, no worries, no anxieties, but merely to be perfectly calm and quiet all the time? Yet that is what time is for, to learn just that and nothing more. And so as we begin to explore this idea of holy instant, just that one line kind of sums it up. As I think about where in my experience there may be a sense of suffering or a sense of fear, it's always in the occupation or the busyness of worrying, the sense of self-management, this idea that I have to take care of myself. So when I read this line that asks me if I can imagine what it means to not have the burden of these thoughts that are always concerned about this separate self, this idea of myself as separate, when I'm asked to imagine what it means to have none of that, it all of a sudden seems to open up a portal for which the experience of the holy instant is now welcomed. When I think about the teaching of the Course, for me in my experience, it feels like this is really it. That we can actually come into an awareness that who and what we are is without the burden of these thoughts of a separate me, these thoughts of a me working against the world or working in opposition with the world or defending myself against anything in the world. And so I really think in this one lesson, the ability, the willingness, the capacity to open oneself to the holy instant, which is only a holy instant from the perspective of the separate self. In reality, it is the holy, it's the whole, it's eternity, but it feels like an instant when we forget who we are. We are aiming back to this instant, but in reality, it's eternity. So that just really warms my heart, and I feel like when the Course talks about being vigilant for God, being vigilant for kingdom, it's really saying being vigilant for this instant, which is perfect, is always now, always available, and freely given by our Creator and by God. And with that, I would love to introduce our guests, Kevin Rice. Kevin, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Craig, thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, as I said earlier, I've never met you before, but like a lot of people that I have come to meet, it's been through the Course and been an inspired extension or invitation. So I'd love for you to just share, if you can, what comes from your heart as to your experience with the Course for some of us who may not know you as well. Yeah, if you can just share a little bit of how you come into the Course.
Absolutely. Actually, when I was 15 years old, I started a ministry as a fundamentalist Christian evangelist. I had my own TV shows in Kansas City, and I did that till the age of about 20. And at the age of 20, I went to a psychiatrist, and I unloaded on him. I said, look, I'm traveling the country. I've got my own TV show. I'm preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ as I understood it at that time. But I told him I'm miserable, and I was living a very hypocritical life. And after that hour was over, he says to me, Kevin, you know, I don't think that you need therapy. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I've never done this in my 15 years of practice, but he said, I want to give you a book. And he gave me A Course in Miracles. And I took it home, and I opened up the front page where it said, this is A Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. This course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And as I read that first passage in A Course in Miracles, I felt that I had found the answer to what I had been calling out for, because I had spent weeks before then basically in the front pew of my church at 6 o'clock in the morning saying, look, God, if you want me to find you, you're going to have to show me, because I'm tired of looking myself. And it was the moment that I gave up the search for God that A Course in Miracles was delivered to me. And I believe that's the same dynamic that really happens in our quest and search for the truth as it's set forth in A Course in Miracles. You know, A Course in Miracles says, seek not outside of yourself, for it will fail and you will weep each time an idol falls. So what we're really looking for is not the truth. You're not seeking for the truth. We are not seeking for love. We are seeking instead for all of the illusion and the barriers that we have built against that truth and against that love. And that's really what the sojourn of the Course in Miracles is all about. It's all about discovering what those illusions are in our experience. And Craig, as you said, this hour that we share together, this holy hour, is about the holy instant. And in order for us to discover the holy instant, we must be looking at this illusion of time and space in order for us to really understand what the holy instant is. You'll recall that, as A Course in Miracles says, time and space are but one illusion that takes two forms, and I'm looking forward to exploring that with you, Craig, and the rest of the group.
Awesome. So beautifully said. Thank you, Kevin. Now,
I probably should add that I did delve into A Course in Miracles for the next year or two after I met with the psychiatrist, and I began teaching at Unity Worldwide headquarters in Kansas City, and that's really where my ministry began. So I meant to mention that earlier.
Well, a follow-up question was gonna be, I would imagine coming into the course, there were steps to be taken as you went from, teaching the gospel to now, to a course, which, is very different from a particular perspective. So can you just share a little bit about that switch? Because I would imagine you had to confront some of the blocks to the awareness of love's presence as you made that transition.
Well, yes, the juxtaposition between what the ego, or what the Course would call the ego's religion, all right, and that is any religion that has at its base fear, or guilt, or punishment, or a belief in hell. Now, all of these are juxtaposed between what the Holy Spirit offers, because everything that the ego holds out in its dynamic, the Holy Spirit offers a better dynamic. And it shows us that, for instance, the only message that the crucifixion has to offer is that it can be overcome. And at the basis of what I call first century Christianity, or the teachings set forth in the Course in Miracles, is based upon the resurrection, not the crucifixion. It is based upon life, not death. It's based upon love, not fear. It's based upon peace and not conflict, and it's based upon joy and not suffering. You'll note that the Course says that the Holy Spirit always teaches through comparisons. But it's not a comparison between dualistic things within this world. It's a comparison between what is real and what is not. And as most of the students here would recognize from the Course, where it says that salvation is nothing but the recognition that what was never true is not true now and never will be. That the impossible has not occurred. And at the beginning of A Course in Miracles, there's that statement that says, into eternity, where all is one, except the tiny, mad idea in which the Son of God, that's you and I, remembered not to laugh. You say, Kevin, remember not to laugh at what? Remember not to laugh at this mad and insane notion that we could be separate from our source, or that our source could be separate from us, that we could be separate from our brothers and sisters. Right now, with the people that we gather with, we are exchanging molecules with everyone. And the only thing that is separating us from our brothers, or our brothers from ourselves, is the tool of separation that we call judgment. Now, what is judgment? Judgment is the belief that what God created can and has been changed. Now, let me repeat that, because this is very important. Judgment is the belief that God created as unchanging, unchanged, and unchangeable somehow can be changed. We demonstrate that we believe that it can be changed every time we place a judgment upon our brothers and sisters, which can show up as anger, rejection, as holding a grievance, or as holding a grudge. Now, I really like the fact that, Craig, that you've chosen the topic today as the holy instant. And A Course in Miracles says that the holy instant is a miniature of eternity. It is a picture of timelessness set in a frame of time. And I think the operative word in that phrase, the holy instant, is the word holy. Right? You cannot be both holy and sinful at the same time. And this was another juxtaposition between my being raised in fundamentalist Christianity and my upbringing with the Course in Miracles, is this whole idea of sin, or as I like to call it, self-induced nonsense. And the world, unfortunately, most of the separated ones walk around this world, and what they're carrying around with them in this present moment is not a sense of holiness. In fact, it is the exact opposite. It is a sense of guilt. All right? And I guess it can be explained most easily this way, and Alexander Marchand talks about this in his book, The Universe is a Dream, and I hope that maybe you have had him on your show in the past, I don't know, but he's a great guy. But essentially, if you're carrying around guilt in the present moment as opposed to holiness, how that will manifest in your life is it will show up in the past tense as a belief in sin. And it will show up in the future tense as a belief in fear. So every time you're carrying that guilt around with you in the present moment, that's how it's going to show up in your life. You're going to have moment by moment with thoughts of sin pervading your mind and thoughts of fear pervading your mind. And as we all know already, whenever anyone harbors that guilt within their mind, they will invariably and inevitably create a scenario in which they punish themselves. And so the message of A Course is this: you are not guilty. And this was a major, major thing for me in my life. I remember 25 years ago when I first started A Course in Miracles, and I lived in Kansas City at the time. And I remember I had to go on a trip somewhere. I think it was to Springfield, Missouri. It was like 3 or 4 hours away. And while I was in Springfield, I made a mistake of some sort. And I don't remember what that mistake was, but I was guilting myself on the drive back to Kansas City. But I had been probably in the Course in Miracles for like 6 months, 8 months, and I remembered, no, I am not guilty. And I prayed that prayer from A Course in Miracles, which I probably pray at least 2 or 3 times a week, which says, I must have chosen wrongly because I am not at peace. I made the decision myself, but I can decide otherwise. And I want to decide otherwise because I want to be at peace. I do not feel guilty because the Holy Spirit will undo all the consequences of my wrong choice if I will let Him. And I choose to let Him by allowing Him to decide for God for me. So when you do that, when you release that guilt and allow it to be replaced by an experience, I didn't say a concept, but an experience of holiness, an acknowledgement of holiness, and you give that mistake over to the Holy Spirit, that statement is very, very true, at least it has been in my experience. The Holy Spirit will undo all of the consequences of my wrong decision. And I have seen, and I won't go into my personal examples here, but I have seen the Holy Spirit step in and undo time and space and literally undo the consequences of my wrong decision. That's how we collapse time and space.
Beautiful, beautiful, and I'm with you on that. And you've said everything that you've said has just been so beautiful. I can take little pieces of it, and we can continue to talk about it. I'll try to just kind of touch on some of those things that really landed. The first thing that you said that I thought was really, really important and key, and is a beautiful reminder, is that now we're not seeking for anything. And I know for me, in my experience, there was a lot of seeking, and it's interesting. The Course almost came into my experience in such a way that it was attractive, and I was seeking something. But eventually, what the Course is teaching us is that, in fact, we're not seeking love, and we're not seeking the holy instant, but rather we're allowing whatever's blocking it to be removed or dissolved by the Holy Spirit. So that is so important to remember, because even in my experience recently, I'll give an example, there was a thought about money that came up. and the thought was that there was a way that needs to be a way of generating money needed to be made, or I needed to be worried about how am I going to do X, Y, and Z. And I can feel myself get caught up in trying to find the solution in form, when going back to what we're saying here, what's being said, is that there is no problem. The problem is the perception that I'm somehow separate from, in this case, abundance. So that's not to say that there won't be any doing or anything to be done to, that would facilitate getting money or money coming in, but rather starting from the place of where the correction needs to be made is in the mind, this idea that there's something missing, in which case whatever is done through inspiration or through guidance, as opposed to trying to manipulate my life circumstance or try to come up with the answer, which is always, in my experience, is suffering when I'm trying to fix things in form or have an expectation of outcome. It needs to be this way or that way and so forth. Because I always find myself disappointed when I go about life that way. So I think it's beautiful what you said about this is not about seeking. It's really about looking and using the principles of forgiveness, atonement, for the illusion that we are believing in. And in my case, in that moment, it was this idea that I'm lacking. So I'll just stop there and just see what comes through for you, Kevin.
Yeah, it's what the Course refers to as the scarcity principle. That I seek for without, that which I think is lacking within. And I mentioned this in chapter 2 of my book, The Game of Love, Changing the Rules Changes Everything, as well. Because people come up to me all the time. Say, Kevin, how do I find love? How do I find a relationship? And my immediate answer is, give up the search for it. Because the search is implying that what you are searching for, you do not possess. Otherwise, why would you be searching for it? So it's this continuous, I posted this on my Facebook page, I believe, from someone, where it says that the truth is here and now. And the search says that it is tomorrow. That it's always in the future. And this is a very subtle, egoic way of keeping you out of the present moment. Because the ego knows that if you truly experience the present moment in its totality, you would question the wisdom of ever going into the future or into the past to try to retrieve your reality. And this is a really scary notion for a lot of Course in Miracles students, especially at the beginning, and that is this whole concept of giving up planning for the future. I mentioned to you on the phone the other day, Craig, I said, I just need to warn you, Craig, I'm not very good with this whole time and space thing, because I'm not. I'm not. And that's okay. That's okay. Because when you release the future and stop defending it, and you give up your defenses, what you discover is that you are being carried forward. I love what you said, Craig, about understanding really and truly the nature of abundance. I live here in Miami, and I was at the beach, actually right before I spoke in New York, and I was laying out on the beach with my partner, Aaron, and he was talking about the fish in the ocean. They were swimming and jumping, and the birds were in the air. And I said, you know what, Aaron? I said, as the Discovery Channel reminds us, fish do not swim. They are swum. And birds do not fly. They are flown. In other words, their anatomy is such that the ocean or the air really carries them forward through life. And the same is true for us, you and me and all of our brothers and sisters, with no one excluded, that when we understand that notion, then we understand that the children of God do not think they are thunk by the mind of God. So we have to give up this raucous, shrieking voice of fear that we think is our identity, so that we can instead be thunk by the thoughts of God. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So when that happens, you do find yourself being carried forward. lifted ahead. You know, there's a lesson in the Course, and I believe it's the one that says, either I rest in God or I walk to God. And it asks you in that lesson to pretend that there's a big round circle ahead of you, and that circle is your mind, and it's covered with clouds in front of it. And it's asking you to imagine going past the clouds and feeling the clouds brushing past you as you go toward that circle or your mind. And it says, if you are doing these lessons properly, you will feel as though you are being lifted up and carried ahead. Now, I don't know about you, but I want the comfort of that experience, not just during my meditative times, but I want it in the totality of my living experience, every second of every minute, of every hour, of every day, of trusting in that presence. You said that you had to come to a place where you knew that your abundance came not from this world, but from your connection to God. And the same is true, Craig, with our safety. That's why the Course says, try to feel safety surrounding you, upholding you, hovering over you, carrying you forward and lifting you up. It's that same thing. You know, because it all boils down to one thing, Craig, and that is that we're afraid. We are afraid. When you had that money moment, you had a moment of fear. I had a friend call me last night with a panic attack. And I had to remind myself through that experience that when we become afraid, we're not here to ask God or the Holy Spirit to take it away, but instead to ask the Holy Spirit to help us to understand the condition which brought the fear about in the first place. What is the condition that brings fear about? It is the condition of the belief in separation. And that's why one of my most favorite phrases in the Course is, who walks with me? Who walks with me? Because when you understand that you're not alone, that God is here, Emmanuel, God is with us, and when we acknowledge that presence, which I do in my meditations every week here in Miami, and that is, we take a moment to acknowledge the presence of God in our midst. We take a moment to acknowledge the presence of holiness in our midst, to the point, like the Course says, that we approach that moment like we would an altar dedicated unto God the Father and to God the Son, for such is the place that we are trying to reach. So when we acknowledge that in those moments when we are afraid, and say, whoa, why am I afraid here? I'm afraid because in this moment, I think that God has abandoned me. I think in this moment that I am alone, in a world gone mad, when in fact, a simple shift in my thinking returns me to sanity by recognizing that God is here, and that I walk to heaven with God, hand in hand with my brothers and my sisters. And guess what happens? That fear begins to dissolve. That sense of lack begins to dissipate.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like this constant reminder that reality with a capital R is now, is here, and if it appears as if it isn't, it's only a misperception. But the reality of God is always with us and always here. I had a question come up in one of my blog posts where someone asked the question, how do I bring the kingdom into my life? Well, it's not about bringing something into the life. It's recognizing that life, the kingdom is life itself. And it's only when we are caught up in an investment in this thinking that says we are somehow separate from the kingdom. But the kingdom, what you're saying and what you're saying, the kingdom is here. We don't have to look for it. We don't have to go in it. We don't have to purify ourselves. We just need to be willing to be wrong about these barriers we put out. So even in my example, I have to be willing. I have to be willing to be wrong about this idea that I could ever be without abundance. And it's
Right.
my insistence that says that, yes, I'm lacking, that's going to block me from the present awareness of reality, that I am abundant, that there's nothing but abundance for all of us to share.
Right.
But it's not conceptual, and it's not informed.
Exactly. I think that there are a couple of things here that are really relevant to what you were saying. The first is, as you said, you know, heaven or nirvana is not somewhere else. It's not in some other time. It's right here, and it's right now. As A Course in Miracles says, heaven is here, there is no other place. Heaven is now, there is no other time. Now, from a practical standpoint, what does that mean? Well, I'm reminded, first of all, of the great Krishnamurti. You're probably familiar with him, where he really lays it out. And he really echoes what A Course in Miracles says, too, and I'll get to that in a minute. But Krishnamurti lays it out by saying, really, the cause of all of your suffering, the cause of all of your conflict and strife and struggle within this world lies between two positions. One is accepting what is, all right? And then there's this other dynamic that says, this is what should be. So most people are going through life not accepting what is. All right, remember that course lesson? I will accept all things as they are. All right, not as they should be. So most people are going through life imposing what should be over what is. And so you invariably have a conflict because what should be is the antithesis of what is. Now, this is exactly what A Course in Miracles says. Would you rather be happy? In other words, would you rather just accepting all things as they are, or would you rather be right? Because that is the conflict between what is, what should be, between being happy and being right. And it's that letting go of your need to try to orchestrate, manipulate people, things, and events to try to improve upon the world or to improve upon yourself. It is letting go of the temptation to try to improve the world generally. And it's understanding the principle in the Course that it is not my job to change this world or to change anybody. It is my job to change my mind about this world. Why? Because the fundamental law of perception is this, that we will see what we believe to be there, and we will believe it to be there because we want it to be there. All right? You want conflict? Boom, it is done. You know, you want peace? Boom, it is done. It's all dependent upon what you want in life. Again, it's a difference between accepting what is and letting go of your notion of what should be. I don't know how many times I have to, you know, I've been in relationships, Greg, where I would have been better off taking a cheese grater to my face. Why? Because we don't know what is in our own best interest. And it's in the recognition of that fact that we begin to understand that there is a presence within us that does know what is better. Now, we're talking about the holy instant today, and it's in this holy instant that we actually hear the voice of God. You know, when all these people in this room came to hear you and I speak, Craig, where did they go? They went to where the speaker was speaking. They went here. And the same is true with the voice of the Holy Spirit. In order to hear that voice, you have to go to where the speaker is speaking. Where is the speaker speaking? It's speaking in the present moment. And in order to hear that voice, that still small voice, we must also be in the present moment experience. You know, I go, this is now my third year going through the lessons in A Course in Miracles with one of my best friends, who's also a minister with the Academy of Spiritual Awakening, our organization, Reverend Esteban Landano. And we go through the lessons every year. And so we're just starting the lessons up again. I think we're on lesson number 7. And I was going through lesson 5 a couple of days ago, and I have this new app on my phone, and it's called the Mindfulness Bell. And I think it's free on most phones. And it just has this bell that goes off every hour. And when it goes off, I have an immediate reminder of what that lesson is today. And by the way, you want to talk about accelerating your experience of the lessons of A Course in Miracles, you know, get this bell or something, because it's extremely helpful in terms of doing the lessons. But I mentioned that to say this. The lesson was, I am angry because I see something that is not there. Now, this is a very interesting experience to go through the day, because whenever you are worried, whenever you are anxious, whenever you are fretting, whenever you are angry or holding a grudge, boom, the bell goes off and you're like, oh my God, I am upset because I see something that is not there. So what I am responding to is not reality. What I am responding to is my interpretation of reality, which is wrong. All right? And so it's at that moment, again, that you understand that what this course really is all about is recognizing hallucinations when they occur. So let me give you an example, if I may. If I'm sitting here, Craig, and I say, Craig, I'm going to hypnotize you. All right? And I hypnotize you, Craig, count you down, and as I hypnotize you, I say, Craig, when you open up your eyes, that computer that you're sitting right in front of is going to be a swarm of snakes. All right. So you're still in a hypnotic state, a mesmeric state, and you open your eyes and you see a swarm of snakes right in front of you. And here's the rest of us in this room looking at you, screaming at the top of your lungs, because you think that there are a swarm of snakes in front of you. Now, the question on the table is this: how do we help Craig Villarrubia overcome this illusion, this hallucination that he is being attacked by a swarm of snakes? Do we go to your house and remove the snakes? No. No, we don't. What do? We wake you up from the illusion that you are dealing with snakes. That's how we deal with it. We don't deal with it by giving any energy or any attention to those snakes, because to us, they're no more different than a shadow upon a wall. They are nothing. And that's the whole message of A Course in Miracles. You know, if somebody comes to me with an appearance of fear, an appearance of lack, an appearance of sickness, what do? Do I treat it as those things are real? No. I treat it for what they are, and that is a hallucination. You have to recognize it as that. And by the way, this is what Christian scientists do. This is what a lot of people in Unity do. And a lot of people in the Course in Miracles. They recognize the hallucination for what it is, and they treat it accordingly. They don't try to change it. They don't try to improve upon it. All right? They look at it for what it is. It would be equivalent to me standing in front of a mirror, and I see that my hair is disheveled, for instance. Do I go to the mirror and try to comb the mirror to fix my hair? No. I comb my hair. And this is the message of A Course in Miracles as well. That we don't try to change the world, we change our mind about it and correct it at the level at which the error occurred. The level of the mind. So, I know I'm being verbose here, but I'm wondering, do you take questions during this process, Craig? I don't know. It's my first time on here.
Yeah, no, this is perfect timing. I'm going to go ahead and invite anybody who wants to join in and have any questions to just unmute and go for it.
Yeah, I do have a question. I look at Jesus' ministry, and I can see where he didn't go out to try to change the world. You know, when he addressed issues in the world, I think he addressed people's perceptions and thinking about what was creating those conditions in the world. Which is probably why, you know, he didn't leave much behind in the way of writing a book himself or something. But then I look at people like Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi, and they apparently, there was this component to their mission that was about changing people's minds and hearts, definitely. But they also took this stance against what was happening in the world, or had some approach to it that seemed to be more than just maybe changing people's minds. And so I myself have a little bit of struggle of when might we think it's appropriate to maybe even address some occurrence going on in the world, even though we may know it's an illusion. Is there a time or place to sort of address the illusion, not maybe from the goal of trying to change what's going on, but for the goal of maybe creating some recognition or something that might be causing the illusion to happen? And I guess it's sort of like, I know the Course itself talks about a compromise approach between if your mind is still in a fear-stricken state, that these snakes are real, perhaps it's good to have a dual approach where you sort of convince Craig that you're treating the snakes, when in reality you're also addressing the mind that's creating the snakes. So anyway, that question has been sort of bubbling in my head, and wondering, and I suppose I tell myself, well, if I listen to the Holy Spirit and let Him direct me, I don't have to constantly think about when is it appropriate to manipulate the world and when is it not. That I should let that direct me and not let my judgment perhaps direct me. So anyway, that's my thought, and whatever you might have to say about it, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, Craig, do you want me to take that?
Please do, go ahead.
Okay. The Taoists have a saying called, by the way, your name is Mark?
Yes.
Welcome, Mark. It's good to have you on.
Thank you.
The Taoists have a saying that is called Wu Wei Wu, which means doing, not doing. Now, A Course in Miracles has very much the same message. Actually, you'll find it in the original edition of A Course in Miracles when Jesus talks about the Great Crusade. And he says the slogan or the motto for the Great Crusade is this: listen, learn, and do. Listen to my voice, learn to undo error, and do something to correct it. So no one is saying that you have to be not doing anything. What we are saying instead is this: when you do something, you are being propelled by one thing and one thing only, and that is the voice of the Holy Spirit saying, go there, do this, say this. Now, I'm not talking about this experience like some pie-in-the-sky kind of concept. I'm talking about it as a day-to-day relationship with this voice. Now, I'm going to give you one example of what I mean here. One time, I was living in West Palm Beach, and my partner and I are sitting on a couch, and I had my friend, his name was also Kevin. He was behind me at the computer, and he closed up the computer, and he came around, and he sat down right next to us. And then all of a sudden, my mind was blank. It was, I'd like to think it was abstract. The mind in its natural state is abstract, by the way, and that's how you're going to hear the voice of the Holy Spirit. But all of a sudden I hear this small voice saying, go wash Kevin's feet. Now, anybody that knows me knows that I'm not a foot person at all. But I have learned to not question this voice. So I went into the kitchen, got a bowl, got a towel, everything, and I just went over, took his flip-flops out. We live in Florida. And I began washing his feet, and as I did, he began to cry. Now, I finished up, dried his feet off, sat back down, and I said, Kev, why? And he said, because I was just on the computer on the importance of what it means when somebody does it to you. And then I sit down, and all of a sudden you get up and begin to wash my feet without even knowing what I had just read. Now, my point is this. There's a section in the Course in Miracles that says, when the Holy Spirit speaks to you, it may ask you to do some very strange things that you do not understand, but do it anyway. And this is just one example, that you're not going through life allowing the ego to dictate your next move. In fact, you're doing the exact opposite. You are, as I said, allowing your mind to be thunked by the mind of God, to allow the thoughts of God to direct your life and your movement throughout this world. And when you change your mind, Mark, what you discover is that, as Gandhi discovered, as Martin Luther King discovered, and so forth, that you begin to take action. And I can assure you that that is exactly what they did. They listened to that voice that said, go there, do this. So we're not saying don't be inactive and be completely passive. We're saying act, but do so only in accordance with the voice of the Holy Spirit. And, by the way, Mark, there's a way you can tell whether you're listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit or the voice of the ego. The voice of the ego always speaks first, always speaks loudest, all right, and always is asking a heck of a lot of questions. The voice of the Holy Spirit is that still small voice underneath it, and you will know it when you hear it, because it will come out of absolutely nowhere. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and it was beautiful also, Mark, when you were asking the question. It was beautiful to see how like time collapsed at the end when you seemed to have received the answer, which was going back to, and I think it's what Kevin was saying, is that the Holy Spirit is going to guide you in each moment. And I also got that there is no judgment in what the Holy Spirit is asking. So it's the same thing with what we perceive in the world about, Martin Luther King or anybody else or Gandhi. This has nothing to do with behavior. So it's not judgment on what they're doing or not doing or what people are doing in the world. It's really about whether or not we are following this guidance. And I find in my experience, when guidance is followed, there is no choice. So if there's an inspiration to stand up to something, then that's what's to be done. And there's innocence in that too. There's innocence in it. The innocence doesn't go away, and it's not to say that the world, in my experience, it's not to say that the world needs to be a certain way. We go back to what Kevin was sharing, is am I willing to accept things as they are, regardless of what it looks like? And it's always going to be my interpretation that's gonna cause suffering for me. It doesn't mean I condone anything either way. It's funny. It's like if I accept things as they are, that means I accept everything that's happening in the world. I'm not in opposition to anything. The ego says, well, then you must be for war. You must be for something, and that's not it either. It really, I think, for me, brings home this idea of above the battleground. It's the opportunity we really have to look at things from a perspective that is not of this world. So, thank you for sharing, Kevin.
Yeah, what comes up for me when you were talking, Craig, was fighting the illusion at the level of the illusion. That's this non-acceptance of it, and that's what you don't want to do. It's like you sort of see what's happening in the illusion, and it's a product of people's thoughts, a product of the mind, and so if you try to fight it at the level of form, at level of illusion, that's when you're being drawn into you're being drawn into the illusion and fighting it on its own terms, so to speak. But anyway, yeah, I get I hear what you're saying, and I will.
And Mark, we might add one other thing here.
Sure, sure.
The Course tells us that this is a course in content, not in form of any kind. And the reason for this is because this world is nothing but an effect. It's a mirror. It's a manifestation of an internal state of mind. It's an outward picture of an inward condition. So, for instance, here in Miami, we have a lot of homeless people. And you're driving down the street, and you see a homeless person, and your immediate thought is to place, as Craig said, a judgment upon that, maybe to want to change it or so forth, instead of what the Course is really asking us to do. And that is this: to recognize that this external, quote-unquote, external manifestation of homelessness is nothing but a reflection of an internal state of homelessness that you and I all feel. As the Course says, you find yourself a stranger in a strange land. We're like the prodigal son. We ourselves are homeless. And so, yes, we're going to see a manifestation of it outpictured in our world. We're going to see it because the world is nothing but an effect. And so what you do or not do with that homeless man or woman is done from that perspective. In other words, you're approaching that individual from the holy instant instead of from using the yardstick of time and space. So this world is a world of content and not of form. Now, there's this prayer, since we're talking, Craig, about the holy instant, that I often do with the homeless, since I'm using them as an example. And I do this all the time with my friends as well, where it's that prayer that says, I desire this holy instant that I may share it with my brother Craig, whom I love. I cannot have it without him, and he cannot have it without me. But we can both share it together now. And so I choose this instant as the one to give to the Holy Spirit, so that his blessings may descend on us and keep us both in perfect peace. Now, one of the aspects of the holy instant is I have to include you in on it. I have to give this moment right now over to you. Now, I'm not calling Craig up on the phone and say, hey, Craig, I just sent you a holy instant. No. My practice, as the Course demonstrates, is one that is done silently, sacredly, and secretly. All right? Because my thoughts are the most powerful mechanism for affecting change within this world. Your mind is either a miracle maker or a miracle breaker, depending on whether you're listening to the voice of love or the voice of fear to propel you forward within this life. Any other questions? Do we have time, Craig, for any more here?
We have time. Does anybody else have a question? If not, if you do, just take yourself off of mute. And while you are contemplating your question, I just want, Kevin, if you could share, I just learned about your book. Share a little bit about your book and a little bit about the Academy. I would really appreciate if you did.
Book is
love to hear it.
Right, The Game of Love, Changing the Rules Changes Everything. And my website's theacademyofspiritualawakening.org, and you'll find several videos on there, both myself and Reverend Esteban Londano. 2 3-minute videos, very short. There's some longer videos as well called the Miracle Hour that we did here in Miami. But with respect to the book, it's a book about relationships, all kinds of relationships, familial, romantic relationships, work relationships, it doesn't matter. And I set forth a model within the book of how to move forward in life from conditions that are healthy. Now, we know that love is not conditional, but, I mean that love survives in a certain condition. For instance, right now, it's 75 here in Miami. And if I step out, the sun is shining, I'm going to have the condition of warmth. Okay? I'm going to have the condition of heat on my body. Well, the same is true with love. When you're in the present moment, which is the portal which love flows through, there are 5 conditions that you're going to be in. Love is now, love is within, love is content, love is freedom, and love is creation. This, again, is juxtaposed between the ego's way of dealing with relationships within this world from its scarcity principle standpoint, and that love is not now, love is not within, love is form, love is imprisonment, and love is extinction. All right? So basically, I go through all of those 5 steps, both from the perspective of the ego and the perspective of the Holy Spirit, from love, from fear, and so forth, and I give practical tools to help the reader understand how to move forward in their relationships and have their relationships turn into holy relationships and have them transformed from special relationships. How to transform their dream of fear, and as you said, Mark, gently transform it into a dream of love, because a good teacher does not terrorize his students. So we want to bring an individual to the awareness of truth gently and not reinforcing fear to the process. In terms of the Academy of Spiritual Awakening, Craig, it's an online ministry right now. I do have students that I carry them forward, and we meet here once a week in Coconut Grove, and we try to get as much online as possible. So to really try to affect change, and by the way, Mark, I was instructed to do this by that voice several years ago, and it had nothing whatsoever for me to do going, oh, what do I do here in time and space? No. That was given to me to do as an instruction by the Holy Spirit. So, Craig, that answers your question. I hope so.
Yeah, thank you for sharing everything that's going on, and certainly make these resources available. I want to just make mention that the Academy website is the Academy of Spiritual Awakening.org. That's where they can find it. Kevin, we have 2 minutes, so just if anybody has any other questions, they're more than welcome or invited to share or ask. Otherwise, we are going to wind down, and I'm going to formally thank everyone for their presence. Kevin, it's such a joy to have you on. I'm so glad that you accepted. It's beautiful to hear the insight and the wisdom and the communication that's coming and flowing through. And I'm just, words can't really describe it. I feel great, and I'm grateful. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Craig. And listen, I hope this is the beginning of a good friendship and brotherhood. I very much am honored to call you my brother and my friend. And Craig, I so much enjoy your work as well on the internet. And I know that you're speaking in Las Vegas, right?
Yes.
Coming up. So I encourage everyone to definitely go hear him. And Corrine is joining you there as well, right?
That is correct, yeah.
And if nobody has told you today that they love you, allow me to be the first. I love you all very, very much. And God bless you.
Thank you. I love you all too. God bless all of you. I love you, love you, love you. Have a good day, everybody. And I'll be here next week, same time, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. My guest will be Michael Murray. Have a good day, guys.
Have a good day.